I never thought I would be scared of my own home. But after what happened with my neighbor, I can never feel safe again. I live in a small, quiet neighborhood. Nothing exciting happens here. People go to work, come home, and keep to themselves. I like that about this place. No noise, no drama, just peace. That was before the man moved in next door. His house had been empty for years. The last owner left suddenly, without saying a word. No one knew why. When the new guy moved in, people were curious, but he didn't talk to anyone. I first saw him one evening while taking out the trash. He stood in his front yard staring at the sky. His back was straight, his hands stiff at his sides. He didn't move when I passed by. "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood," I said. He turned his head very slowly. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes were dark, sunken deep into his skull. He just stared at me, silent. I laughed nervously. "Well, have a good night." Still no answer. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just awkward or shy. Maybe he had a rough past. I didn't want to judge him too quickly. But as days passed, things got stranger. I hurried back inside and locked the door. I told myself he was... The next morning I found deep scratch marks on the wood, like something had been clawing at it. I told my friend Jason about it. He laughed it off. "Maybe he's just weird. You should ignore him," he said. But I couldn't ignore what happened next. One night, the noises from my neighbor's house were so loud I couldn't sleep. I had had enough. I decided to go over there and confront him. I walked to his house and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder, still nothing. But then, the door creaked open. It was pitch black inside. A horrible smell drifted out like rotting meat. I covered my nose and took a small step in. "Hello?" I called. Silence. I reached for the light switch, but it didn't work. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The living room was a mess. The furniture was torn apart, deep claw marks on the walls. The floor was covered in dirt and something wet. My stomach twisted when I saw dark stains leading to the basement door. It was open. I should have left. I should have called the police, but I didn't. I felt this strange pull, like something wanted me to go down there. I stepped forward, my flashlight shaking. The air got colder with every step. I could hear something moving below. Then I heard the whisper, "He sees you." I froze. My mouth went dry. The basement was filled with cages, small rusted cages with bones inside them. Human bones. I saw photos on the wall, pictures of me, dozens of them. Some were taken through my bedroom window, others from outside my house at night. My hands shook. My breath came in short gasps. I turned to run, and he was standing there. The neighbor. His eyes were wider than before, his pupils too large, too black. His mouth twisted into a grin. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. I didn't think. I ran. I shoved past him and sprinted out the door, not stopping until I was inside my house with every lock bolted shut. I called the police, but when they arrived, his house was empty. No furniture, no cages, no photos, just dust and darkness. He was gone. The police didn't believe me. They said no one had lived in that house for years. But I saw him, I insisted. I spoke to him. They exchanged glances. One officer sighed. That house has been abandoned since the last owner disappeared. I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. They left, probably thinking I was crazy. But I know what I saw, and now, every night, I feel him watching me. I hear the whispers. I see the shadows move, and sometimes, at 3 a.m., there's a knock on my door. I never open it. I know who's there. After that night, I couldn't sleep properly. Every small sound made me jump. Every shadow in my house felt like it was moving. But the worst part? The knocking. Every night at 3 a.m., it would come. 3 slow knocks. Bang, bang, bang. I never opened the door. I tried ignoring it, covering my ears, blasting the TV. Nothing helped. The knocking never stopped. One night, I stayed up with a baseball bat in my hands, staring at the door. When the knocking started, I gripped the bat tighter, sweat dripping down my back. "Go away," I whispered. Silence. Then something slid under the door. A piece of paper. My stomach clenched as I picked it up. It was a photo of me sleeping. I dropped the bat. My hands shook as I checked my windows and doors. Everything was locked. But that meant someone had been inside my house before. I called Jason. "You need to get out of there, man," he said. "Come stay at my place." I didn't argue. I packed a bag and drove to his house that night. But even there, I couldn't relax. The feeling of being watched never left me. A few days later, Jason and I went back to my house. I had decided to move out. I didn't care about selling the place. I just wanted to be far away from it. When we got there, everything was quiet. The air felt heavy, like the sky itself was pressing down on us. "I don't like this," Jason muttered. Neither did I. As we packed my things, I kept looking at my neighbor's house. Even though it was supposed to be empty, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was inside, watching us. Then Jason froze. "Dude, look." I followed his gaze to my backyard. A tall, thin figure stood at the edge of the trees. It was him. His face was stretched into an unnatural smile, his head tilted at an angle that wasn't human. His hands hung limp at his sides, fingers too long, too thin. Jason grabbed my arm. "Get in the car, now." We ran. We didn't stop until we were miles away. That night I stayed at a hotel. I locked every door, covered every window. I told myself it was over. At 3 a.m., I woke up. The air was cold. The room felt wrong. I turned my head, and he was inside the room. Standing in the corner, his dark eyes locked on mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body was frozen in place. He took a slow step forward, then another. His mouth stretched into a grin. He leaned in, inches from my face. "You shouldn't have left." Then everything went black. I woke up in my car the next morning, parked miles away. I had no memory of leaving the hotel. My body ached, my mind foggy. The hotel staff said no one had entered my room, but I know what I saw. I never went back to my house. I moved to a different state, changed my phone number. Jason and I don't talk about that night. But sometimes, I still hear the knocking. Bang, bang, bang. At 3 a.m. no matter where I am, and I know. He found me. I thought moving would keep me safe. I thought putting distance between myself and that house would make the nightmares stop. I was wrong. No matter where I went, I felt him. Watching, waiting. The knocking didn't stop. At first, it only happened once in a while. A few weeks of silence. Then, bang, bang, bang. Always at 3 a.m. But then, it started happening more often. Every week, then every night. Hotels, apartments, even when I stayed at Jason's place, it didn't matter. He always found me. I tried everything. Security cameras, motion detectors, even sleeping with a knife under my pillow. But the cameras never caught anything. The motion detectors never went off, but I knew he was there. And then one night, something changed. It was late. I was in another hotel, another city. I had just started to drift off when I heard it. Not the knocking, a whisper. "Let me in." My blood turned to ice. I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark, but I could feel something in the corner. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight. Nothing. But I knew better. He was there. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. Keep moving. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't outrun him. One night, I got a call from Jason. "Dude," he said, his voice shaking. "Are you messing with me?" "What?" "The knocking. It started at my place." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" "3 knocks, every night, at 3 a.m. I didn't know what to say. "It's him, isn't it?" Jason whispered. I gripped my phone. "Jason, listen to me. Do not open the door. Do not let him in." Silence. Then Jason said something that made my stomach drop. "I already did." The call cut off. I tried calling Jason back. No answer. I drove straight to his apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, the place was a mess. His phone lay on the floor, screen cracked. The furniture was overturned. The windows were open. But Jason was gone. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Just gone. The police didn't take it seriously. Said he probably left town. But I knew the truth. Jason let him in. And now Jason was his. That was a month ago. Jason never came back, and now the knocking isn't just at my door. It's at my windows, my closet, my bedroom. He's getting closer. Last night I woke up and felt something breathing next to me. My blankets were ice cold. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I heard it, a whisper. "It's your turn." I don't know how much longer I can run. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because I think, deep down, I always knew. You can't escape him. I don't sleep much anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I feel him. Watching, waiting. I moved again. A new apartment, a new city, a new name. I even changed my phone number. I cut ties with old friends. I wanted to disappear, but he always finds me. It started the first night in my new place. I had just finished unpacking, exhausted but relieved. This time, I told myself, would be different. Then, at 3 a.m., bang, bang, bang. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I didn't check. I didn't need to. But this time, there was something new. A voice. Right outside my door. "You let him in." I didn't move. The voice sounded familiar. Jason, or something pretending to be him. I covered my ears and rocked back and forth. "You're not real," I whispered. "You're not real." The knocking stopped, but the whispering inside my apartment didn't. I don't leave my apartment anymore. Every night, the knocks come. Every night I hear Jason's voice, begging, crying, screaming. I know it's not really him, but I also know if I open the door, I'll never come back. I stopped calling the police. They wouldn't understand. I tried recording the sounds, but every time I played them back, there was nothing, just silence. I even set up cameras. They showed me sleeping. But in one recording, at exactly 3 a.m., something changed. For just a few seconds, the screen glitched. When it came back, my bedroom door was open, and I was still asleep. Last night was different. The knocks didn't come. Instead, I woke up to my phone vibrating. A text. "Unknown number. Let me in." I threw the phone across the room. My breath was shaky, my body drenched in sweat. Then the bed shifted. Like someone sat down next to me. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't scream. Then a voice, right next to my ear. There's nowhere left to run. The lights flickered, the room turned ice cold, and then nothing. I stayed awake until morning, too afraid to move. I don't know how much longer I have. I can feel him now. He's not just outside the door, he's inside, watching, waiting. I'm so tired. Maybe if I just stop running, maybe if I just let him in, maybe end of recording. Final police report. Date, redacted incident, missing person name, redacted details, apartment found empty. No signs of forced entry, All belongings left behind, no known travel plans. Final phone recording ends at 3 a.m. Last words, maybe if I just let him in, case remains unsolved. I don't know how much time has passed. Days? Weeks? It doesn't matter anymore. I haven't left my apartment. I haven't eaten. I barely sleep. Because I know the moment I do, he'll take me. I see him now. Not just in shadows, not just in my nightmares, he's here, in the corners of my room, in the reflection of my mirror, standing at the foot of my bed, waiting, watching, smiling. The knocking doesn't happen anymore. He doesn't need to knock. He's already inside. I have two options. I can keep running, keep hiding, keep pretending that I have a chance. Or I can stop. I can let him in. I'm so tired. Maybe Jason was right. Maybe there's nothing to be afraid of. Maybe this is where the journal ends. Date, redacted incident. Unexplained disappearance name, redacted detail. Apartment found empty. All doors locked from the inside. No signs of struggle. Personal belongings untouched. Bed still made. Only unusual evidence. A single handwritten note left on the desk. The note read, "Key is here. Case remains unsolved." I moved into my new apartment on a warm summer day. It was small but perfect for me. The rent was cheap and the building was quiet. I didn't know anyone there, but I liked that. I wanted a fresh start. The landlord, Mr. Garcia, was an old man with a kind face. As he handed me the keys, he said, "Most people here keep to themselves, but if you need anything, just let me know." I thanked him and went inside to unpack. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a strange noise from the apartment above mine. It sounded like furniture dragging across the floor. Then there was knocking, slow and steady. Knock, knock, knock. I shrugged it off. Maybe someone was moving furniture or fixing something. The next day, I met my neighbor from across the hall, Mrs. Lewis. She was a short woman with gray hair and a friendly smile. "Welcome to the building," she said. "I hope you like it here." "Thanks," I said. "It seems nice." She hesitated, then said, "If you hear anything strange from apartment 303, just ignore it." I frowned. "Why?" She sighed. "The man who lives there, he's different. He doesn't talk to anyone. Just ignore him." I wanted to ask more, but she shook her head and walked away. That night, I heard the knocking again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was louder. It lasted for hours. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I went to work feeling exhausted. When I came home, there was a note on my door. "Stay out of apartment 303. Don't look inside." There was no name, no explanation. I felt a chill run down my spine. That night, the knocking started again. I covered my ears with a pillow, but it didn't stop. I finally had enough. I marched upstairs and knocked on the door of apartment 303. "Hey, can you stop making noise?" Silence. I knocked again. Still no answer. I put my ear against the door. No sound at all. Just as I was about to leave, I heard something whispering. A cold, shaky voice said, "Help me." I stepped back, my heart pounding. I ran downstairs and knocked on Mrs. Lewis's door. When she opened it, I could see fear in her eyes. "You knocked on his door, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded. She shook her head. "You shouldn't have done that." I swallowed hard. "Who lives there?" She hesitated, then whispered, "No one." I felt my blood turn cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. She glanced around, then pulled me inside her apartment. "Years ago," she said, "there was a man named David who lived in 303. He was quiet, never talked to anyone. Then one day, he disappeared. The landlord found his apartment empty, but his rent kept getting paid. No one ever saw him leave. No one saw him again." I shivered. "So who's living there now?" She shook her head. "No one. But people still hear noises, the knocking, the whispers." I didn't believe in ghosts, but something was definitely wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. The knocking was louder than ever. I stared at my ceiling, listening. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard my door creak open. I froze. I had locked it, I was sure. I sat up and saw a shadow standing in my doorway. Tall, thin, unmoving. My body was paralyzed with fear. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure slowly stepped into my room. Then, just as suddenly, it disappeared. The next morning, I packed my bags. I didn't care about my lease. I had to get out. As I was leaving, I saw Mrs. Lewis watching me. She didn't say anything, just gave me a sad smile. As I drove away, I saw the window of apartment 303, and in the window, a dark figure stood watching me. Knock, knock, knock. I never looked back. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away from the apartment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind kept replaying what I saw, that dark figure standing in my doorway, the way it disappeared, and the knocking that never stopped. After a few hours, I pulled over at a gas station. My heart was still pounding. I needed to calm down. I grabbed my phone and did something I hadn't done before. I searched for apartment 303, Brookside Complex. At first, nothing unusual came up, just rental listings and a few reviews. But then I found an old news article from 15 years ago. Missing man's apartment found empty, but someone still pays the rent. I clicked on it. The article said that David Carter, the man who had lived in 303, was last seen entering his apartment. No one ever saw him again. But the strange thing was, every month, his rent was still paid. His bills were taken care of. The police investigated, but they found no signs of foul play. Then I read something that made my blood run cold. A new tenant moved into apartment 303 2 years later. He stayed for 1 month, then he vanished. Just like David Carter, the same thing happened to the next tenant, and the next one. All of them disappeared. I dropped my phone, my hands shaking. I thought about the knocking, the whispers, the shadow in my room. I thought about the note on my door. Stay out of apartment 303. Don't look inside. Someone had tried to warn me. I started my car and drove to the nearest motel. I needed sleep, but I knew I wouldn't get any. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark figure standing in my doorway. I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I called Mr. Garcia, the landlord. "I want to break my lease," I said. There was a long silence. Then he sighed. "You saw him, didn't you?" My mouth went dry. "Who is he?" Another pause. Then in a tired voice he said, "I don't know. No one does. But you were smart to leave." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. "What happens now?" I finally asked. He sighed again. "Another person will move in. The knocking will continue. And someday, someone will make the mistake of opening that door." A chill ran through me. I thanked him and hung up. I never went back to that apartment. I never even drove by it. But sometimes, late at night, in the silence of my new home, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I pray it never finds me again.